Love the life you live. If you don't love it, change it. I found those words on a coaster on an Airbnb in Bali at the very end of my 6 years living, working, and traveling around the world. And I loved it because that was such a perfect way to encapsulate how I've been living my life over the last 6 years. I'm here to tell you a story. It's a story about travel and a story about why getting robbed at gunpoint in Colombia is the best thing that's ever happened to me. It's also a story about how I lived in 6 countries, spent 3 years as a digital nomad, and checked everything off my bucket list by the age of 36, including traveling to 45 countries and all 7 continents. But much more than that, this is a story about self-discovery and self-realization, about breaking down every aspect of my life and transforming it into the life that I actually wanted to live. And as I did that, I discovered a piece of myself that I hadn't even dared to put on my bucket list because I never thought that I could actually have it. More than anything else, though, this is a story about letting go of fear. Fear after fear after fear after fear that I found along my way. And stopping to make decisions about planning for the worst case scenario, about trying to prevent bad things from happening, and instead moving forward based on intuition, gut instinct, whatever you want to call it. And the things that I thought would really take me where I actually wanted to go, toward the life that I actually wanted to live. Because whenever I made decisions planning for the worst case scenario and trying to prevent bad things from happening, that never worked out for me. I had a lot of bad things happen that way where I was like, what am I even doing? And the more that I let go of the fears that were holding me back, the more I just walked in the direction I actually wanted to go, the more I realized that I didn't really need to be scared in the first place. And tonight, the thing I want you to walk away with, more than anything else, is believing that anything is possible, that the Disney movies were right, that anything that you want for your life, you can have it. Because traveling to all 7 continents and checking everything off my bucket list by the age of 36 are not the craziest things that I've done. Tonight, you guys are going to be the first to hear about how, over the last 7 years, I learned to believe in magic. But before any of that, I was living in California, which is where I'm from, in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I had made a pretty good life for myself there. I had a husband who loved me, who was a good guy. I had good friends, and I had a pretty cool job, working at the Freeman Spokane Institute for International Studies at Stanford University. And that really mattered to me because I felt like there I was making a difference in the world. I was working with people who were like the top experts in their fields all around the world. Like the former US ambassador to Russia is on my reference sheet, people like that. So I had built a life that I really should have been happy with, but I just wasn't. Because it didn't really feel like my life. It didn't really feel like the life that I really wanted to live. Because I had always wanted to travel. And I would have straight out of college if I hadn't met my ex-husband. I would have gone to teach English abroad somewhere. And as I was getting close to 30, I was reflecting on my life and the things that I'd done and the things that I hadn't. And I was like, you know what? I really wanted to go and live abroad and live the travel life. And I haven't done it. So I did. And, people ask me how I ended up doing all the things that I've done. And we are going to talk tonight about how I did it. And, if there are changes in your life that you'd like to make, ways that you can do that too. But at the end of the day, it really all comes down to one very simple thing. I just did it. I took Nike's advice. Just did it. And pretty much everyone I know who has done things like that also did it that way. They just decided that they were going to make it happen no matter what. And they went and did it. So if you need, if you're busy tonight, and you can walk out of here right now, that's all you really need to know. But stick around, because the rest is a pretty cool story. Also, there's karaoke at the end, so, worth sticking around for that. So I started applying for jobs abroad. And as I did, I kept hearing the same thing. Oh, your resume is great, but you've never lived somewhere like this before. I was specifically targeting developing countries, so places that were really different from California. And people were scared that I was going to show up and freak out and leave, which is fair. So at the same time, I was working what I would describe as a burnout job at Stanford. I felt like I was doing 2 jobs in one and trying to apply for jobs on top of that. It was too much. I couldn't do it. And so the very first step that I ended up taking on this journey was really scary. I ended up getting on a plane to Thailand without a job lined up. And that was really scary for me because I am a millennial. I graduated college in 2009, and so my first few years out of school were really tough trying to get work. And so I was really scared about the idea of being unemployed. And doing that in another country where I had to think about visas and cultural differences and language barriers and all that was really scary for me. But at the end of the day, I really wanted to make this happen. So I decided I was just going to do it and hope for the best. And worst case scenario, hey, I would have lived abroad. So I did. I got on that plane to Thailand without a job lined up, but with 3 informational interviews set up that first week in Bangkok, because what I did instead of finding a job was hit my network at Stanford up really hard for contacts, because I knew people who knew people all around the world. And so I was able to get a few people to talk to me that first week. And what happened, which is what has happened every time I have done something scary that takes me in the direction that I really want to go, is that somebody showed up for me. One of the people I met with that first week worked for the UN. And so I spent my first few months in Thailand working on a project to build a communications plan for a small program at the International Labor Organization that they were trying to scale up to a global level. Then through another Stanford contact, I ended up working with an NGO in Cambodia that focused on the Khmer Rouge. And for most of that first year, I documented the Khmer Rouge Tribunal by interviewing judges, attorneys, and staff who had worked on the international side of the tribunal, which is a pretty cool job. And I went into that first year with a lot of expectations about what that year was going to look like. And I managed to check off pretty much all of them. What I wanted most was to live on the ground in a developing country, working with local people so that I could really and truly immerse myself in a culture that was very different from mine. And I did it. I was the only foreigner in my office when I was in Cambodia. But it wasn't easy. I basically had to change the entire way that I talked for the people in my office to understand me, because I was communicating in English. I didn't really speak any Khmer, and it took me a while to realize that half the things I was saying were going over everybody's head, because in Cambodia, they learn a very formal version of English, and so any colloquialisms, any idioms, anything that was not super proper formal English was going right over people's heads. And it took me a month to realize that, because in Cambodia, saving face is a very important part of the culture. And so nobody was ever going to tell me that they didn't understand me. And so I had to figure it out based off of context clues and figure out a way where I could kind of assess whether people were understanding me, and then surreptitiously figure out another way to say things so that they would understand me. Because again, I can't let them know that I know that they don't understand. And that was really hard. And then there was the rest of my life. Cambodia is hot and humid. Like the weather that we've been having here in Kansas City, that's what it's like year round in Cambodia. And Phnom Penh, where I was living, is a very different place than California. I like to think of it the way I imagine New York City looked about 100 years ago, but with cell phones. The buildings are so close together, there's hardly any green space, and it is total chaos all the time. The best way that I can describe Phnom Penh is that you'll have like a 2-lane road, and across those 2 lanes, you'll have at least 7 motorbikes, 4 tuk-tuks, a car, and a donkey cart, and at least one of those is going the wrong way. It was a complete barrage on my senses every single day. But one of the things that I realized that first year is that hard things aren't so hard when you're getting to choose what they are. Objectively speaking, yes, that first year in Cambodia was way harder than living in the San Francisco Bay Area. But it felt so worth it in a way that spending 2 hours a day in Bay Area traffic did not. Because I was living the life that I had wanted to live for years. I was doing the thing. I was traveling. I was living abroad. I was very much immersed in another culture, and I still have friends from my office to this day. And that made all the hard things feel worth it. At the end of that first year, just as I was starting to get my feet under me and feel like I know what I'm doing, the pandemic hit. And in March of 2020, the US State Department put out a notice that everyone living abroad better get back now. And if you stay out there, the embassy is not going to help you if anything happens. So my ex-husband, who by the way had been with me this whole time, and I had to make a decision real quick about whether we were going to stay or whether we were going to come back. We ended up coming back to the States on the last plane that was allowed to transit through Taipei before they shut down the borders. And then 6 months later, we split up. So in October of 2020, I was homeless for the second time in 2020. I was at that point working remotely in California. I had not wanted to come back to the US, and I didn't really need to be here, but I couldn't leave because it was 2020. So I looked around and I was like, Puerto Rico's kind of like living abroad. One of the things that I have learned out there is that bad things aren't so bad when they take you where you really want to go. Getting divorced during the pandemic, not really what you want. Definitely something I think we would all consider a bad thing. But the truth is, it actually did take me exactly where I actually wanted to go. Because Puerto Rico was not on my radar at all before any of this. Like, I was focused on getting outside of the US, and since Puerto Rico is a territory, was not on my radar. But of all the places I've lived, of all the places I've been, Puerto Rico is the one that feels the most like home. The one that feels the most like me. Because I spent my 2 years there hiking up rivers and jumping off waterfalls and going to the beach almost every day. Puerto Rico was the first time in my life that I was able to live the weekend warrior lifestyle out in nature that I had always wanted to live. And the best thing about it was that when I was there for the first time in my life, I was meeting people who wanted to live that life too. And the thing that I learned while I was there was how much better my life was when I was prioritizing fun and play and bringing as much joy into my life as I could. Puerto Rico was the first time in my life where I truly had work-life balance, because I was spending those weekends just adventuring and exploring the island. There were these 7 weekends in the fall of 2021 where I had met a friend and we just kept finding things that we both wanted to do. And we didn't even plan it, but we ended up spending 7 weekends in a row exploring the island together. And it was probably the best time in my life. And it really shouldn't have been, because at that point, I was going through it with my divorce. I was living alone for the first time as an adult because I had been with my ex-husband since I was 18 and I was at this point 33. So that was hard. And I was also doing it during a pandemic in a place that's like not the easiest place in the world to live. And I was finding that the job that I had taken pretty much just because they would let me live in Puerto Rico wasn't quite aligned with what I wanted. But I didn't really care about any of those things because I got to go hiking before work a couple days a week. And I got to go to the beach. And I got to live that life that I had always wanted to live. And there were so many things that I loved about those 2 years in Puerto Rico. But what I'd really wanted to do this whole time was be a digital nomad. Ever since I met them in my early days in Thailand. People who worked remotely and traveled around and didn't really live anywhere. So at the end of 2022, I made another decision that was really scary and decided that I was going to leave Puerto Rico, even though it was in so many ways the life that I had really wanted to live, and go and travel around the world instead. And the thing about that was really scary was that I had spent my last 2 years in Puerto Rico trying so hard to buy a house, because I am once again a millennial from California and it was never gonna happen for me there. But in Puerto Rico, suddenly it was possible, and I could buy a house like 10 minutes from the beach. That was possible. So I tried really, really, really hard to make it happen, and it just kept not happening. But one of the things that I have found, one of the harder lessons I've learned out there, is that if you try really, really, really hard to make something happen and it just doesn't, there's probably a reason for that. There's probably something better out there for you. And that is very much what happened to me with all of this. Because what I really needed to do at that point in my life is to take the money that I had saved for years for a down payment on a house and put it toward traveling around the world instead. Because that was the life I actually wanted to live. And that was absolutely terrifying, because that is so not what you are supposed to do. That is not what we were told. I was like, oh my God, how am I being this financially irresponsible and doing this? But it felt right. And 3 years later, I'm so glad that I did it. Even though there is a real possibility that I will never own a home, because that was the life that I actually wanted to live. And 2 years into that, I had moved on average every 10 days and checked everything off my bucket list by the age of 36, including, without even really trying to, traveling to all 7 continents. And even though now I am very much dealing with the consequences of my life choices, it was completely worth it. Because now, every moment of my life feels like a bonus. Because I've already done the things that I really wanted to do. And that piece of my life is what finally brings us to why getting robbed at gunpoint in Colombia is the best thing that's ever happened to me. So I left Puerto Rico at the end of 2022, and the first place I went was South America because I was trying to avoid winter be amazed at how many decisions I've made in my life with that as the goal. And in February of 2023, I was in Medellin, in Colombia. I was walking in a park. And as I did, I walked by a man and a woman on a bench. And as I walked by, the guy got up, tackled me, grabbed me by my backpack, and pulled me off the trail, down a hill, and into the brush. Then the woman came down behind us, and she pulled out a knife, and the guy pulled out a gun. So we kind of knew what was going to happen at that point. They took my wallet, they took my phone, they took everything. They took my Disneyland backpack. It's fine. It's not fine, it's fine. So as a result of that, and some misadventures with FedEx, in which we are no longer speaking, I ended up traveling through South America without a phone for 3 months. Now, I don't want to give the people who robbed me like a pass or anything, but I am genuinely glad that I got robbed at gunpoint in Colombia, because those 3 months were the most amazing experience I have ever had in letting go of fear and learning how to trust that everything was going to be okay. Because lots of bad things happened to me because I was traveling without a phone for 3 months. For example, I was in Santiago in Chile. About a month after all of this happened, I was at that point traveling with a friend that I had met in Lima, and we were out late. She wanted to stay out, I wanted to go home, and so she called me an Uber on her phone, and she put the address in wrong. And so the Uber ended up dropping me off at 12:30 in the morning in not a great part of Santiago. I was about a mile away from where I was supposed to be. I literally didn't even know what direction to walk. And the Uber driver was like, sorry, I can't really do anything for you. So I just started walking. And what happened, which is what has happened every time all around the world when I've gotten myself into trouble, is that some kind and helpful person showed up to help me. I came across an apartment building that had a security guard in the lobby. I walked in, explained the situation in Spanish, and they were able to call me an Uber to get me the rest of the way home. And it was fine. Everything turned out fine. And I had enough things like this happen over my 3 months in South America that by the end of the trip, I was like, I got this. I can do anything. Everything's gonna be okay. At one point, towards the end of the trip, I was in one really rural part of Chile, trying to get to another really rural part of Chile. Didn't know how to do it, knew it was possible, so I just went for it. And the amazing thing is not that I was able to do it, but that I really wasn't that worried the whole time about how that was gonna go. A couple of years earlier, I wouldn't have even attempted to do something like that without directions. A few months earlier, I probably would have, but I would have been freaking out the whole time. I would have been like, oh my gosh, how am I ever gonna do this? But this time, I was like, it's gonna be fine. Even when, at one point, I was quite literally wandering the streets, completely lost and confused. But again, some nice person out in the world came up to me and was like, are you okay? In Spanish. And I was like, yes, please help me. Also in Spanish. She put me in a cab, told the cab driver exactly where I needed to go. He made sure I got on the right bus, and everything turned out fine. Everybody in the bus around me was freaking out on my behalf. They were like, oh my God, this poor little lost white girl, she has no idea what she's doing. She's gonna die out here. And I was like, no guys, it's fine, it's all gonna be fine. And it was fine. And that whole experience ended up being just this amazing exercise in how to have faith. Faith in myself, that I could get myself out of anything. In Spanish, which I was very happy about after 2 years in Puerto Rico. It made me believe that I was gonna be okay because I would never let myself not be. But it also gave me this amazing faith in humanity, because so many people over the course of that journey did show up to help me. And it made me realize how many kind, caring, and generous people there are all around the world. Something I've experienced a lot of other places as well. The first time that I gave this talk, I realized that I wasn't just talking to other people about how to let go of fear, how to do what feels right, how to believe that everything is going to be okay. That I was actually giving myself a pep talk to do something really scary. I am writing a book about the last 7 years of my life. And I am right now getting ready to start publishing chapter by chapter on Substack. So I'm kind of publishing as I write it. So first, if you are interested in that, my QR code is up here. Take a look. There's a book section on there, and that'll take you to Substack where you can subscribe. But the first time I gave this talk, I realized that what I was really doing was getting myself ready to talk about a part of this story that I don't really talk about because I don't know how you're going to take it. And at this point, I really need to start talking about it because it is the part of the story that means the most to me. The part of the story that I'm centering the book around. And so tonight, you guys are going to be the first to hear a part of the story that I don't really talk about. And I said earlier that what I hope you walk away from tonight is believing that anything is possible. Literally anything. And this part of the story is the best part that I can give you, the best example I can give you. That when I say anything is possible, I mean that literally. When I was a kid, what I wanted more than anything else in the world was to grow up, to travel around the world, learning about magic. Not tricks, real magic, like Harry Potter magic, the kind of magic where you wave a wand and something flies into the air, that kind of magic. And when I was a teenager, I was so sad and depressed because I knew that that's what my life was supposed to look like. But I had absolutely no idea how I could ever get there because that shouldn't have been possible, right? That was actually the reason I decided to travel in the first place. When I was about 17, I sat myself down and I was like, all right, self, this is obviously not gonna happen. So we can't do the magic part, but we can do the travel part. So we're gonna do that, and that's gonna have to be good enough. And it was such a long time between when I made that decision and when I actually got on the plane when I was 31 that I forgot that that was why I decided to do all of this in the first place. I had no idea when I got on that plane 7 years ago that what I was really stepping into was a life where I would grow up to travel around the world, learning about the real world equivalent of magic. So that part of the story starts about 6 months before I got on the plane. In the fall of 2018, I got really sick. I got mono, and then I got pneumonia on top of it. And for the next 4 years after that, anytime I got sick, any kind of respiratory illness, a cold, anything, I would get so sick that I was like flat on my back, could not work for like 3 to 4 weeks at a time. Which is a real problem when you're trying to hold down a full-time job. So I was absolutely desperate to find a solution. I went to so many doctors, and Western medicine quite literally told me they couldn't do anything for me. So then I turned east. Started to do things like acupuncture, and that was helpful, but it wasn't quite getting me where I really needed to go. And so I opened myself up to anything that could possibly help me. And when I was in Cambodia, like at the very end of the time, I started to experience what people call energy work. So Reiki is the example of this that the most people know. The idea is that you take energy floating around out in the universe and direct it into somebody's body to help them heal. And guys, I never in a million years would have tried this. I never in a million years would have paid money for somebody to hover their hands over me and say that that was going to heal me. But right before I left Cambodia, I was at a retreat and Reiki was part of the offerings for the retreat. So I was like, all right, I guess I'm trying this. And yeah, it worked. I had someone hovering over me for an hour with their hands in different parts of my bodies. And at the end of it, I felt really good. I kind of felt like I had just gotten a massage, even though she had never actually touched me. And so after that, as I continued to travel around the world, particularly in Puerto Rico, I started to find other people who did energy work, who incorporated that into whatever it is that they did to help people heal. And it did, honestly, help me a lot. But more importantly, that's magic to me. Being able to manipulate something out in the world without actually touching it, like that's magic. That is my definition of what magic is. And I could leave it there. And if I was at a conference or something trying to give this talk, maybe I would. But I told you before that I wanted you to come out of this believing that anything is possible. And the truth is, that's not the most magical thing that I've experienced. In the fall of 2021, at the first of what ended up being our 7 weekends traveling around the island in Puerto Rico, my friend told me something about her life. And when she did, I just blurted out without even thinking about it. I can see the future and read minds. I had never told anyone before. Not my ex-husband, not my family, none of my friends. I had never even said those words out loud before because I knew what people would think. They would think I was crazy. I didn't want that. So why would I say anything? I was 33 years old. The first time I said out loud the thing about me that I thought was the coolest. And the thing is, I didn't even really believe me until I started talking about it. And when I did, when I started to be honest about who I was and what my experience with life was actually like, I started to meet other people who could do things like that too. People who see ghosts, people who see demons or fairies, people who talk to spirits, people who knew things about me that they could not possibly know. And I'm not talking about generalities or things you could pick up by going on my Facebook feed. I mean things that I had never told anyone, inherited back to me from people I barely even knew. So when I talk about magic, that's really what I'm talking about. Now, why am I telling you all of this? First, because this is a huge part of the story and I really just needed to own it. Because I don't talk about this part of the story when I talk to people. And if I'm gonna write about it, I better get started. I'm also doing this because I think we need to start talking about this as a society, because I, at this point, have met dozens and dozens of people all around the world, including Kansas City, people who can do things like this, who experience the world a little bit differently from how you're supposed to be able to experience it. And there's so many more of us than I think any of us really know. Because most of these people, like, I am not talking about people like ranting and raving on the street. I am not talking about people who are coked out on drugs. I'm talking about normal people who live fairly normal lives, who experience the world differently from how you're supposed to be able to experience it. and don't talk about it, because they also don't want people to think that they're crazy or just write them off. But there's so many of us, I think it's time that maybe we start talking about it a little bit more. So I am also telling you all of this to invite anyone who hasn't really talked about a part of themselves that means something to you, who's scared to make that choice, to maybe start talking about it a little bit. Because my life has been a lot better since I started talking about it. Because as I have met people who are just so much more aligned with who I am than I ever expected to find. And for those of you who are sitting out there being like, well, this took a turn. This is not what I signed up for. Thank you for bearing with me. You do not have to believe me. It's totally fair if you don't. All I want you to get out of this is this. This is what feels real for me, which means that I was able to fulfill my childhood dream of growing up to travel around the world learning about magic, about the real world equivalent of magic. If I can do that, you can do anything you want, because your dreams cannot possibly be more impossible than mine. So when I say that anything is possible, I really do mean that literally. So, before I let you go, if you are sitting out there and you want to make changes in your life, but it feels hard or scary or just too much, we're going to take a couple minutes to go through a little exercise that I do these days when I'm trying to figure out what my next steps are going to be, or I'm trying to figure out where I really want to go. Because again, I checked off everything on my bucket list by the age of 36. So I've spent a lot of time in the last 2 years being like, cool, now what? And as I've gone through that process, these are the 2 questions that I ask myself to figure that out. So number 1, if I were to come out there and hand you $1 million, what would you do? Or maybe you have really big dreams like I do. Maybe $1 million isn't enough. Maybe you need $1 billion. Point is, if you never had to worry about money again, what would you do? What would that life look like? And number 2, if you knew definitively that you only had 6 months to live, if God came down right now and was like, hey, you got 6 months, make the most of it, what would you do? What would that life look like? So I take a step back now and I think about my answers to those 2 questions, use them to figure out where I really want to go. And when it seems like too much, when it seems impossible, I figure out a way to take the first step. And then I take another one. And another one. And it doesn't always take me exactly where I expected to go. But usually, when I get there, it turns out to be better than I ever could have imagined. So I hope that you can walk away tonight really and truly believing that whatever version of your life you want is possible. Because I think we would live in a much better world if people believed that they could live the lives that they actually want to live. And if you feel like you need a little bit of help getting there, call me. I'm always happy to have that conversation. All right. Thank you, and thank you for those of you who are bearing with me through the magic part. I know there were some surprises in the room tonight, so I appreciate you. If you do want to talk more about any of this, check out my website. QR code's up there. There's a contact form on there if you want to talk more. Feel free to scan that and send me a note. I will be sticking around tonight as well, so if you want to talk more about any of this, if you'd like to travel more, if you do want to figure out how to take the next steps in your life, or if you want to talk about the magic stuff, I will be here. More importantly, stick around for karaoke. I am at Hammers pretty much every Monday night for karaoke starting at 8 p.m. So if you can't stick around tonight, you can find me here most Mondays. And Jay over here too. So come hang out with us, please. Thank you again to Hammers for having us. Please do support them. They are the reason I was able to do this for free tonight. So if nothing else, stick around to support Hammers a little bit more. And real quick before we head out, I'm going to ask my friend Valerie Lewis to come up to this stage. And for those of you who are curious about this whole magic thing that I've been talking about and would like to chat with somebody about it, you can talk to me or you can talk to her too. So this is Valerie Lewis. She is... she's a psychic medium who lives in Kansas City. She also does manifestation training and tarot readings, or tarot, as she would say.
Get it right.
So feel free to chat with either of us if you want to hear more about this. And I actually had a couple of other people who were planning to be here tonight to talk about the magic part of this, but they weren't able to make it. So I'm going to ask the audience to do something a little bit scary. And if you are open to talking about this and you've had these sorts of experiences, would you please raise your hand? When I said there's a lot of us out there, this is what I was talking about. So feel free to chat with any of us. Thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate you listening to all of this. Thank you.